"Sir, I can make your son walk again." The voice came from a beggar girl, barefoot, trembling, yet her eyes burned with certainty. Rohit Malhotra turned, stunned. His son was paralyzed. Was this madness, or the start of a miracle? Rohit Malhotra was not just any man. He was the man, the founder and CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. Rohit had climbed the mountain of success from nothing. Born in a modest family, he had built his first startup in a cramped room with a borrowed laptop. He knew struggle, he knew risk, and most importantly, he knew how to win. Now, in his early 40s, he was a symbol of triumph. Luxury surrounded him. A mansion in Mumbai's elite Pali Hill, a fleet of imported cars, and invitations to every high-profile event. Newspapers called him a visionary. Investors called him a genius. People bowed when he walked into a room. But behind all the glory, his world had grown quiet. Because 6 months ago, his 7-year-old son, Aryan, his only child, his light, his everything, was in a horrific car accident. One rainy evening, as the family returned from a weekend getaway, their car was hit by a speeding truck. Rohit had suffered only minor bruises. His wife, Priya, had escaped with a fractured arm. But Aryan, fragile, joyful, innocent Aryan, was left paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors called it a spinal trauma. Surgery was immediate. The operation was successful, they said. But days turned into weeks, then months. And Aryan still couldn't move his legs. Rohit didn't waste a second. He used every connection, every rupee, every ounce of influence. He flew Aryan to the most elite hospitals in Singapore, London, and New York. MRI scans, spinal stimulation therapy, acupuncture, neural reconnection programs. He tried them all. Specialists gave their verdict with gentle voices and sorrowful eyes. "The damage is permanent, Mr. Malhotra. We're sorry." Those 3 words shattered Rohit more than anything ever had. He wasn't a man used to hearing no. But now, he was being told that no amount of power, no amount of money, could make his son walk again. And that truth was crueler than anything he had ever faced in the boardroom. At home, the atmosphere had changed. Aryan, once a bundle of energy who loved football and cartoons, barely spoke. He spent most of his time by the window, watching other kids run, jump, and live. His smile, once infectious, now appeared only in old photographs. Priya tried to stay strong, but even she often broke down at night when she thought no one was watching. And Rohit? He was drowning. He stopped attending events. Meetings were delegated. Stockholders grew anxious as the company's leader vanished into silence. But no one dared ask. They understood. Even billionaires are helpless when it comes to the pain of their children. Rohit's days blurred into one another. He prayed at temples. He donated crores to charities, hoping karma would be kind. He even tried obscure treatments recommended by spiritual healers. But nothing changed. Each night, he sat beside Aryan's bed, hoping to see a twitch in those tiny legs. A flicker, a sign. But the legs remained still, lifeless, silent. And so did Rohit's hope. One morning, he stepped out for a rare walk alone. No security, no assistant, just him trying to breathe. The city buzzed as usual, honking cars, street vendors shouting, children running after kites. It all felt like a different world now, a world where his son no longer belonged. As he waited at a signal near a street corner, lost in thought, a small, sharp voice called out, "Sir, I can make your son walk again." He blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. He turned slowly, and there, standing under the shade of a crumbling building, was a thin, dusty girl, maybe 12 years old, barefoot, her clothes torn at the edges. But her eyes, those eyes, were fierce. Rohit frowned. Had she been following him? "What did you say?" he asked, voice low, skeptical. "I said I can help your son walk," she repeated. Her voice was clear, not begging, just certain. Rohit stared at her, stunned. Of all the things he had expected this morning, a beggar girl promising a miracle wasn't one of them. He glanced around. Was this a prank? Some con? Cameras hidden somewhere? But there was no one. Just her. Just those determined eyes. And for the first time in 6 months, Rohit felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not hope, but curiosity. Who was this girl? And why did he, the most logical man in the city, suddenly want to listen? She couldn't have been more than 12 at a wisp of a girl, standing barefoot on the hot concrete, her skin darkened by sun and soot. Her hair was tangled into wild knots, and her oversized shirt looked like it had once belonged to someone twice her size. Her trousers were torn at the knees. Dust clung to her like a second skin. But her eyes stopped him cold. They weren't the eyes of a beggar. They didn't plead or whimper. They shone with something pure, something unshakable. Belief. Not in fate, not in money, but belief in something she knew, something she carried like a secret fire. "My name is Mira," she said, her voice soft but sure. "I know how to heal him." Rohit Malhotra stood frozen. The street behind him was alive with movement, traffic honking, people shouting, dogs barking. But for a moment, everything blurred into silence. Only the girl's words remained, echoing in his ears. He glanced around. Was someone filming this? Was this a setup? In a city where scams were common, a beggar claiming she could cure paralysis sounded like the cruelest kind of con. His first instinct was to walk away, to dismiss her like 100 others who approached him daily. But something about her, the way she stood, steady as stone, the way her voice didn't shake, the way her eyes didn't look at his watch or wallet, only at him, made him pause. He narrowed his eyes. "What did you say?" "I can heal your son," Mira repeated. "Let me try." He frowned. "And how exactly would you do that?" She stepped forward, but not too close. Respectful, controlled. She lifted her chin. "My grandmother was a Janawali, a traditional healer from our village. People came from far away when doctors gave up. I was with her always. She taught me. I watched her heal people who couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't eat." Rohit crossed his arms, voice dry with disbelief. "You're a child. What would you know about healing spinal trauma?" Mira didn't back down. "I know how to feel where energy is stuck. I know how to press points that make the body listen again. I know how to bring back what the world says is gone." He shook his head. "Little girl, I've spent lakhs. Singapore, London, New York. I've hired experts, flown in specialists. Don't give me false hope." At that, Mira's face changed, not with offense, not with fear, but with something rare in a child. Conviction. "I don't want your money," she said. "I don't want anything. Just let me try." That last line hit Rohit like a quiet storm. Just let me try. He studied her closely. No tremble in her voice. No flinch in her eyes. She wasn't acting. She believed, truly believed, she could help. But how? How could a girl who barely had slippers claim to solve what the best doctors on the planet could not? And yet, Rohit's mind raced. He had said no to so many. To tantrics, to miracle men, to self-proclaimed godmen. And here was this girl, not asking to perform rituals, not chanting mantras, not promising the stars, just asking for a chance. Still, the rational part of his brain pushed back. "Why would you help us? What do you want?" She shrugged. "Because your son deserves to smile again, and because I couldn't save my little brother." That made Rohit blink. "My brother had the same injury," she said, eyes now clouding. "He fell from a tree. We had no money, no doctors. My grandmother tried, but she was already sick. I watched him lose hope. I watched him fade." A pause. "I don't want that to happen again. Not if I can help." Silence hung between them. Rohit swallowed, trying to steady the lump rising in his throat. He had met thousands of people in his life, businessmen, politicians, even saints. But he had never met someone like this child, scarred by pain, yet untouched by cynicism. Finally, he exhaled. "And if it doesn't work?" Mira looked up, steady and calm. "Then you lose nothing. But if it does, your son gets his life back." Rohit was a man of logic, data, facts. But in that moment, none of those things mattered. Only a father's desperate heart and a girl's quiet courage. And so, he did something completely out of character. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small notepad, wrote an address, and handed it to her. "Come tomorrow morning," he said. You have one chance." Mira nodded, and just like that, the girl turned and walked away, barefoot, dusty, but with the quiet poise of someone who carried miracles in her shadow. Rohit Malhotra had never believed in anything he couldn't explain. A man of logic, figures, and facts. He had built his empire by calculating risks and minimizing emotion. But that night, as he sat by Aryan's bed, watching his son silently cry into his pillow, Mira's voice echoed through the empty corridors of his mind. "Just let me try." That single sentence, so simple, so unpolished, clung to him like a shadow. He told himself it was nonsense, that the girl was a desperate child looking for attention. But her eyes, they haunted him. Not because they were pleading, but because they weren't. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Rohit returned to the same spot. And there she was. Mira was sitting on the curb, feeding scraps of old roti to a stray puppy. Her face calm, as if she hadn't spent the night on the street. He approached without a word. She looked up, expectant. "Come," he said. "One chance. That's all." Mira stood up, brushed the dust off her clothes, and followed without question. When they arrived at the Malhotra mansion, a sprawling architectural marvel with glass walls and fountains that never stopped flowing, the staff gasped. "A street girl? Here." The head housekeeper leaned in and whispered, "Sir, should I?" "No," Rohit said firmly. "She's my guest." Whispers followed them through the marble hallways like ghosts. Eyes peered from behind curtains. But Rohit didn't care. They entered Aryan's room, bright, filled with toys, books, and untouched hope. The boy lay on his bed, pale, staring at the ceiling. His eyes flickered toward Mira. She walked in quietly, knelt beside him, and placed her small hands gently on his knees. Then she closed her eyes and began to whisper. Not in Hindi, not in English, but a soft, flowing dialect that Rohit didn't recognize. It wasn't a chant. It didn't sound religious. It was intimate, ancient, like something passed from grandmother to granddaughter, in the quiet corners of forgotten villages. When she finished, she looked up at Rohit. Her face was serious. "Sir," she said, "I'll need 5 days. No machines, no interference, no one watching, just trust." Rohit hesitated. He was used to control, watching every detail, monitoring every result. But something told him to let go. He nodded. 5 days. And so began the strangest week of Rohit's life. Day 1. Silence and touch. Mira sat with Aryan for hours, saying little. She pressed points on his legs, moved her fingers in patterns that Rohit had never seen. Aryan flinched at first, but gradually relaxed. At night, Mira slept on a mat beside the bed, not once complaining. Day 2. Laughter. Something shifted. Rohit heard something he hadn't heard in months, Aryan laughing. He peeked in. Mira was making animal sounds with a sock puppet. Aryan giggled uncontrollably. His mother, Priya, watched from the doorway with tears in her eyes. Day 3. Tears and tremors. That afternoon, Aryan screamed. Rohit rushed in, heart pounding. "My legs!" Aryan cried. "They're tingling." Mira nodded calmly. "It's pain. That means feeling is returning." Rohit stood in shock. Feeling? That was impossible. Or was it? Day 4. Conflict. The family doctor arrived unannounced. He saw Mira and scoffed. "This is reckless, Mr. Malhotra." But Rohit raised a hand. "She stays." That night, Priya whispered, "Are we doing the right thing?" Rohit stared at Aryan, now smiling in his sleep. "I don't know what's right anymore, but I know what's working." Day 5. A flicker of hope. On the 5th morning, Rohit sat outside Aryan's room, breath held. The door opened. Mira stepped out, face unreadable. "He's ready," she said. Inside, Aryan sat upright. Mira held his hands. "Try," she whispered. The boy's brow furrowed. Slowly, painfully, he swung one leg off the bed, then the other. Rohit held his breath. And then, with trembling knees, Aryan stood. Only for a second, but it was enough. Rohit collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed. Priya sobbed. Mira smiled gently, wiped her own tears, and whispered, "I told you. Just let me try." Day 1. The beginning of something different. Mira arrived early, as promised, with a small cloth bundle tucked under her arm. From it, she pulled out strange-looking items: dried leaves, crushed herbs, a small vial of oil that smelled of eucalyptus and mustard, and 2 handmade poultices wrapped in cotton. Rohit watched silently from the hallway, arms folded. She didn't speak to him. She only spoke to Aryan. "Good morning, my prince," she smiled as she sat beside him. "Today, we teach your legs to listen again." She warmed the oil between her palms and began massaging his legs, not harshly, not forcefully, but gently, as if coaxing life back into them with her fingers. As she worked, she talked, not about healing, not about miracles, but about dogs she had met on the streets and funny faces people made while eating sour mangoes. Her words were like lullabies, and laughter rolled into one. For the first time in weeks, Aryan smiled. An hour later, he laughed. Rohit, watching from behind the door, felt a strange tug in his chest. Day 2, a rhythm of hope. The next morning, she returned again with the same bundle, fresh oils, warm compresses, and determination in her step. This time, she told Aryan stories. Not fairy tales, but stories of faith and courage, about people in her village who had nothing but hope, and yet stood strong. About her grandmother, who healed not just bodies, but broken spirits. She worked in silence sometimes, focusing on pressure points. Aryan winced, then relaxed. She sang softly as she applied the poultices, rubbing warmth into his muscles. "You're doing well," she said. "Your legs are listening." That night, Aryan asked his mother to read him a story, something he hadn't done in over 2 months. Day 3. A spark in the storm. Something happened on day 3. Rohit had gone to check emails when a shriek echoed through the house. He dropped his phone and rushed upstairs, heart in his throat. Aryan was shouting, "Papa! Papa, look!" Rohit rushed in. The boy pointed to his foot. His toes moved. Just a little twitch, barely a second. Rohit's eyes widened. "Was that?" "Yes," Mira said calmly. "He's waking up inside. His body remembers." Rohit dropped to his knees, staring at Aryan's foot like it held the answers to the universe. Tears welled up, but he quickly wiped them away. He didn't want to believe it yet. Could it be real? Day 4. Breaking the rules of reality. By the 4th day, Rohit had cleared his schedule completely. No meetings, no calls. He sat outside Aryan's room for hours, listening, hoping. Midday, Mira called out softly, "Come in, sir." Inside, Aryan was sitting up straight, with pillows behind him. "Ready?" Mira asked. Aryan nodded. Mira stood beside him, slipped her arm gently under his, and whispered, "Push." Slowly, shakily, Aryan swung his feet to the ground. Rohit held his breath. And then, using Mira's shoulder for support, Aryan stood, wobbly, weak, but he was on his feet. Rohit gasped. Priya, standing beside him, let out a soft cry and covered her mouth with both hands. For the first time in years, Rohit cried, not in anger, not in frustration, but in a release so powerful it made his knees buckle. Day 5. The impossible becomes reality. The final day arrived like the climax of a forgotten fairy tale. Everyone in the house held their breath. Even the staff, who once whispered behind Mira's back, now watched her with silent reverence. That morning, Mira didn't bring any herbs or oils, just herself and a quiet confidence. She knelt beside Aryan, took his hands in hers, and whispered, "Today you walk." Aryan looked at her, eyes wide. "Alone?" She smiled. "I'll be right here, but your legs know the way now." Rohit and Priya stood in the doorway, trembling. Aryan gripped the bed frame, pushed himself upright, and looked forward. One step. His foot dragged, wobbled, but landed. Another step. And then a miracle. Aryan took 2 full steps, completely on his own. The room exploded into emotion, shouts, sobs, gasps of disbelief. Priya rushed forward and hugged her son tightly, crying uncontrollably. Rohit, too stunned to speak, dropped to his knees, hands shaking. He looked up at Mira, who stood quietly by the bed, hands folded. "Told you," she said simply, with a smile that could melt stone. The room was still echoing with the sounds of celebration. Priya held Aryan tightly, crying into his shoulder. Rohit, still on his knees, was frozen between disbelief and gratitude. Staff members peeked in, some teary-eyed themselves. And in the middle of it all stood Mira, barefoot, dusty, with a streak of oil on her forehead and a smile that lit up the entire room. Rohit stood slowly, walked over, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. "You gave me back my son." She lowered her eyes, shy. "I just helped him remember what was already inside." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Take this. Money, enough to live 10 good lives. You deserve it." Mira looked at it, then stepped back gently. "I don't want money." He was surprised. "Then what can I give you?" "A home. Food. Clothes." She hesitated. Her eyes scanned the marble floor, the chandeliers, the life so different from her own. Then she turned to Aryan, who was now playing with his toy robot, one he hadn't touched in months. "Can I stay?" she asked softly. "Not as a servant, not as a guest, just as his friend." Rohit was quiet for a moment. She wasn't asking for riches, or rooms, or rewards. She was asking for belonging. That night, after dinner, which Mira ate quietly at the far end of the dining table, Rohit sat beside her on the balcony. The stars above shimmered, and the noise of the city felt a world away. He sipped his tea and asked gently, "Where are your parents, Mira?" She stared into her cup, silent for a long time. "They died," she said finally. "Years ago. Fever took my mother. My father left one day and never came back." Rohit felt a sharp ache in his chest. "I tried to stay with people I knew. Neighbors. My aunt. But everyone had their own struggles. I was just a burden. So I left. I've been on the streets since I was 7. 7. The same age as Aryan. He turned toward her fully. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "How did you survive?" She shrugged. "You learn. You beg. You run from the bad people. You find good ones sometimes too. My grandmother. She taught me healing before she passed. After that, I just remembered what she said." Rohit was quiet for a long while. Then, in a voice that cracked ever so slightly, he said the words that would forever change Mira's life. "You healed my son. Let me give you a life too. Come home. Stay. Not as a beggar. Not even just as Aryan's friend. As family." Mira's hands began to tremble. She looked up at him slowly. Her eyes, those strong, sparkling eyes, were now full of tears she had held back for years. "Family," she whispered. "Yes," Rohit said firmly. "No more streets. No more cold nights. You'll go to school. You'll have a room, a bed, a future. You'll never be alone again." Tears streamed down Mira's face. She had no words, only a smile, a real, radiant smile, the brightest she had ever worn. 1 year later, the Malhotra mansion was different now. In the garden, Aryan and Mira ran barefoot through the grass, racing each other. Both were laughing, strong, full of life. She wore a school uniform now, hair neatly tied, books in her bag, hope in her heart. Rohit watched from the porch, Priya beside him. Sometimes, angels don't have wings. Sometimes, miracles come not from hospitals, but from belief. And sometimes, the one who has the least gives the most. Share this story if it touched your heart. And remember, kindness has the power to change more than just one life. Subscribe for more heart-touching stories.